like to get the meeting called to order. This is Rules and Open Government Committee meeting for January 29th, 2014. I don't think we have any changes to the agenda order, so we'll start at the February 4th council agenda. Anything to talk about on page 1? How about page 2 or 3?
We're going to add Licardo's name on presentation 1.1.
Anything else on 2 or 3? Page 4 or 5? Page 6 or 7? Page 7 is the last page of the draft that I've got anyway, so we have an annotation that the bond-funded softball facility update should be heard last. That seems okay with the committee. All right.
Motion to approve with the additions?
Let me see. I might have another.
Should we put a time on that to be heard last, not before 3?
No.
Just last, I think.
Just last.
I do have a couple of requests for additions. Mayor and Council excused absence request for Councilmember Constant. Actions related to Councilmember Chu's travel to San Francisco. Any other requests for additions? None.
Second.
All right, I have a motion to approve with the additions. Mr. Wall, you want to speak?
Thank you, sir. With reference to 2.7, continuation of the construction tax suspension for office/research and development, I think that you should charge someone in the organization to have an accounting on how much money we're actually losing versus how much money we're actually gaining. I think that's reasonable. 2.9, report on bids award for contract for 7409/water valve rehabilitation, 214 rebuild. It would be interesting to know if it's for South Bay Water, Muni Water, or both. I know with South Bay Water Recycling, there's been an issue where they haven't exercised valves, and the valves obviously became stuck, and they have to do extra maintenance on those valves. With 3.4A, subsection 2, the Housing and Community Development Commission has been an issue for some time. What's even more egregious, it'll show up on item E today, is the chairman of this commission appears also to be part of this Working Partnerships USA. This alone seems to be a conflict of interest, but then again, conflict of interests are like three blind people feeling up an elephant. Each and everybody has a different opinion on what the elephant looks like. Thank you.
That concludes public testimony. We have a motion to approve with the additions and the changes we discussed. On that motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. February 11th, draft agenda. Anything to talk about on page 1? Page 2 or 3? I've got a note on 3.3, the mid-year budget review report, that we might need a sunshine waiver. What's the hold up?
That is correct. The report will be ready to be released on Friday with the 10-day packet.
Okay, so it'll go out this Friday. All right.
That's correct.
Anything else on page 2 or 3?
Motion to approve?
Oops.
Not yet.
4 or 5, anything there?
We like it.
We have the audit of taxi services and regulation in San Jose, and the airport ground transportation program item is recommended to be heard last.
Can we add the word definitely?
That seems like the best place to put them, right?
Yeah.
Anything else on page 4 or 5 or page 6? Okay. Mr. Wall, you want to speak?
Thank you, sir. With reference to 9.1, review and discussion of the long-range property management plan, I've noticed this has been deferred a couple of times. for the benefit of the council members that are running for mayor, with the exception of Councilmember Oliverio, who didn't vote for the majority of these land purchases, you might decide to defer this until after the election. Because if the taxpayers ever read this report and see the potential tens of millions of dollars of losses that may occur, depending on if the council votes to sell these properties at the highest bidder, there'll be an orchestra of scorched cats. But the bigger issue here is I think that you should petition the governor, since you're up in Sacramento or wherever else you're traipsing around, to go for the issue that you can't sell properties obtained by the redevelopment agency for anything less than what they were paid for. In other words, if you can break even, that's bad enough to explain to the taxpayers. Some of these properties you've actually made a profit on, but others have made such drastic losses that you can't herald those accomplishments. So try to get the governor to give you some slack and try not to force the sale of these properties. Thank you.
That concludes public testimony.
Motion to approve the agenda?
Motion, including the sunshine waiver.
Yes.
Right, we have a motion to approve. I have no written requests. Do I get a second on that?
Second.
We do have a second. I think there weren't any requests for additions. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unopposed? That's approved. We need to consider the upcoming study session agenda, February 10th. We've got the draft in front of us. I want to just make sure that in the item 3.3, section 3.3, the general fund forecast review and potential revenue measures, that we get a discussion of where we are. I know we don't have the forecast out, but whatever data we have to share about the state of next year's budget, I think is important to set the stage for the discussion. But I assume that would be included in the general fund forecast review, although it's not the official forecast. I don't think we need to add any language to this this list. I think the question we had in front of us was on another item, and that is the ordinance prioritization. We had a question raised, and we talked about whether or not we should go through the exercise in February, seeing what's on the list and what's left, et cetera. So I want to at least ask that question before we approve this, and that really is another agenda item, I think.
Yes,
on our
it's G3 on your agenda for today.
on G3. So why don't we just go to that at this point and talk about that, because that is the question, I think, on this study session agenda, whether or not that's on there or not.
Mayor, council members, Terry Kilgore, city manager's office. There is a placeholder in that item for the council to discuss any process changes you might like to make. We are anticipating making recommendations for new items to be added to the top 10, items that would be removed for various and sundry reasons, as well as new items for the future priorities list.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Oliverio.
Being that we go through this process, which takes up a fair amount of time, and there's already a list of things that have not been done and haven't even been started, and we just out of our council actions yesterday, we gave staff plenty to do. I'd recommend deferring this, dropping 3.4, take it up when actually staff has completed stuff that the council's already voted on in the past.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that the policy and ordinance prioritization actually deserve its own session, simply because I think that we all have certain items that we wanted to discuss, and it gives the council an opportunity to really fully vet some of these items and actually, perhaps take a vote like we've done in the past. And so I don't think that this session on February 10th will allow for all the items that are listed on this agenda to be completed.
Did you have anything to add to that? So I think the question is, we typically do this every 6 months, but sometimes we skip it because of where we are in the process. And I think the last time we had more than 10 that have taken their place on the list
Yes.
slowly.
In fact, one of the advantages of having Mr. Horwittle in our office is he also pointed out one item that's not on the list, but the council has certainly discussed, is potential for, is it rezoning the Sarah properties to public use. And so that would be an item that, while it's not already on the list, again, clearly we've heard from the council interest in pursuing that as well.
Well, I would say that just bring that item forward as itself, because if it's a level of importance that everyone would concur on versus, the other things. And, historically, this meeting has always been about budget.
Yep.
And I think that's where it needs to stay.
So with that, if it were the preference of the committee, we could take this off the agenda. Presumably, again, as Councilmember Oliverio pointed out, we've got plenty of work to do to really occupy us for the next 6 months.
So a motion to approve the agenda, eliminating item 3.4.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion to approve with the deletion of that item. Mr. Wall?
I would like to thank the city manager for pointing out the successor agency to the redevelopment agency properties that are referenced in that long-range property management plan. I think you should really defer this until you get the okay from the governor not to sell this. Rezoning it, of course, will be an interesting bailiwick. Very interesting for the potential bidders on how these will be rezoned. And in parting, I would like to say thanks to our Honorable Director of Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement for holding on another month of torment from entering into the promised land of retirement, to which you folks will probably end up trying to take his benefits away from, as well as other city employees. Thank you, sir.
Question for Councilmember Oliverio. You were talking about items in which we have 0% completion. I'm taking that, or the items that are on the list that's in the staff report that shows Phase 3, 0% complete for the real estate transaction streamlining, and the others, that's what you're referring to?
Yeah, there's plenty of work we've already assigned that hasn't been completed.
Right. Well, there are also items that are not on this list
Right.
that, of course, staff has to work on as
That
well,
was my comments, I thought, brace that.
such as yesterday's action and others. Okay. The motion is to approve the agenda and drop that item off. Before we leave that, so to be reconsidered at some date in the future,
If
depending
we
on how
carried
the
our-
staff workload
Yes,
is.
yes, if we
how the
carried our
progress.
pattern, August timeframe might be the next opportunity to consider reprioritization.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, on that motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. That's what we'll do. We have nothing under legislative updates, as far as I know. Meeting schedules, are there any meetings that we should consider dropping that we've been holding that are coming up that need a clear calendar?
We have a hold on February 18th right now with no items pending for that meeting for a study session.
Is that a holiday week? Yep.
Yes.
Make a motion to drop it or release it.
Second?
Okay.
Nothing.
And drop it, release it, that's the motion.
Okay.
No objections from our staff, because we don't need it. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed, that's what we'll do, release that one. Public record, anything the committee would like to pull for discussion out of the public record? I have some requests to speak. Martha O'Connell.
What's the deal?
It's on.
I'm speaking on letter G, and this is very difficult for me to speak on this letter because you all know that I have supported affordable housing for decades in the city. This request to raise the nexus fee as high as possible passed out of the HCDC committee in November on a vote of 5-3. I was present at the meeting. I was not on the commission. I had 2 minutes. I was very concerned about the discussion that took place. I think when we're dealing with something of this serious nature, I think it would behoove us to hear the other side of the issue, not just the people that are pushing it, but the people that don't like it and the people that are neutral at this point, that need more information. So I know that when this is on the agenda, you're going to have tons and tons of people at the mic. It's going to be very emotional. You're probably only going to give them 30 seconds. This is emotional. It's a housing issue. I understand that. But the bigger issue is to take prudent and reasonable action for the good of the whole city, and I urge you to get more information before you take a vote, particularly from those who are opposed or neutral.
Mr. Wall?
With reference through items A through F, they speak for themselves. Bigger issue, which will be further exegeted at public forum. What do you call a lawyer, sir, that doesn't have a bar, doesn't pass the bar exam? Well, they're not a lawyer, right? But that doesn't apply to engineers, especially to a $2.2 billion capital improvement program at the Water Pollution Control Plant. You have in here, there are several documents that start to show you that you have several engineers in positions of authority or decision-making nodes that are not licensed by the State of California Consumer Affairs Board. In other words, they do not have a professional engineer's certificate that is basically required for city employment. So that raises another issue. So one engineer was hired as a senior engineer without a PE from the State of California, and subsequently apparently didn't pass the test, and is sitting right there making decisions about the water pollution control plant. So before today's over with, there'll be even more documents put forward to you to show you how disastrous this $2.2 billion capital improvement program is teetering on the verge of just embarrassment, if not failure. With reference to this Nexus study, I think you should, as mayor, come forward about the tenuous case presented to the California Supreme Court involving the California Builders Industry Association's claim of an unconstitutional taking, which this Nexus study purports. What's bothersome with this letter is this Brian Darrow. Is he the chairman of your committee? Because he's also listed here as part of this Working Partnerships of USA, which is Cindy Chavez's group. So there's a lot of money being thrown around by this Working Partnerships USA in local politics, as I very well know. And I think that as the chairman of a commission, they should be impartial. Thank you.
Your time is up.
Motion to notify.
Second.
Motion is to note and file the public record on the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Not opposed. That's approved. Moving to section G.
Question,
of the
Mr.
agenda.
Mayor.
Before we move, I just wanted to note that we have a memorandum from Councilmember Herrera about the campaign ordinance relating to marijuana club dispensary contributions that is not being heard today. That will be on next week's rules agenda. Councilmember Oliverio.
That was my question.
Staff is ahead of us. Okay, so G2 is the amendment to the tree maintenance and sidewalk repair financial hardship assistance program. We have a report back from transportation. Jim Wortball.
Good afternoon, Mayor Reed, members of the committee. Jim Wortball, Assistant Director of Transportation. So we're responding back to the committee's direction from last fall on the sidewalk financial hardship program and whether medical expenses could be considered in determining eligibility. So we completed that analysis. We submitted that report to the committee last week. Our key conclusions were that medical expenses can be a significant hardship on property owners who are required to repair their sidewalks. The main method we use to determine eligibility for financial assistance and hardship are federal tax returns. And as we analyze them, we think we can adapt them fairly easily to be able to determine eligible medical expenses and determine if those expenses do cause a hardship and still use our current financial guidelines. We think that's a pretty reasonable and efficient way to do it. With the available staff that we have, we don't think it's going to create much in the way of additional workload, but it can deal with those people that are creating hardships for them to repair their sidewalks. In terms of the budget, as I reported to the committee in the fall, we have a budget this year of about $160,000, and we went through all of that budget this year already The administration is considering augmenting that budget in the mid-year process, so that will come out this Friday in terms of what type of potential augmentations may occur. But overall, we think we can manage these changes to the program with existing staff. We don't think it's going to have a significant impact on the number of actual hardship cases, so we recommend proceeding forward with it. And I'm available to answer questions or receive further committee direction.
Thank you. I have one request to speak on this item. David Wall.
I reviewed the documents at hand, and I was just wondering, because I have an extensive sidewalks in front of my property, and every time one of them goes up, I get a significant pain in my rear end having to be compelled to have sidewalks to begin with. And I want to know if that's going to be considered a financial hardship. If I can document the pain in my rear end, having to shell out money for a city sidewalk that I shouldn't have to pay for in the first place. That's one issue. The other issue faces a drought. When you consider the aggregate number of miles of sidewalks in this city, they should be porous surfaces to allow rainwater to percolate into what little aquifers we have left. Outside of that, I would like to know if our honorable person from DOT is going to be with us much longer, for rumor has it he may also be leaving city service. So you might want to think about, you know, realigning pay and benefits, because we're going to be losing a lot of qualified people. Well, we have lost and continue to lose a lot of well-qualified people. Thank you. And thank you for your service, by the way.
Just make a motion to accept the report. Is that what's needed here?
I think that's all we need to do is accept the report.
Correct. So moved.
Second?
Motion is to accept the report. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unopposed? Report is accepted. We've already talked about G3. We'll move on to G4. That's a recommendation from Councilmember Chu to support Postal Service Protection Act of 2013, Senate Bill 316, House Bill 630. Looks like Councilmember Chu has a stand-in. That would be Councilmember Kalra. I assume you want to speak to his memo? All right.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, in support of the memorandum that Councilmember Chu filed, I would like to speak in support of adopting a resolution in support of Senate Bill 316 and House Bill 630, the Postal Service Protection Act of 2013. I think that we can all agree that, particularly through the financial crisis, the U.S. Postal Service there's been a lot of, it's been very tenuous in terms of the ability for them to provide services and the budgeting of it, of the service, as well as whether there'll be Saturday days or Saturday service or not. Current Senate legislation will place the Postal Service on a path to failure by hurting our communities, seniors, and veterans by cutting Saturday delivery and driving away more business and volume, which I certainly believe, I know Councilmember Chu believes, will be a downward spiral. A third of all mailers and small businesses say they need Saturday services. I know that in my district alone, and certainly in Councilmember Chu's district in North San Jose, there are a number of manufacturers that work all week long and expect deliveries every single day possible, and reducing one of the days would certainly impact their businesses. In fact, eliminating Saturday delivery will eliminate approximately 80,000 jobs, of which almost 25% are being currently filled by United States veterans. Our communities need mail service that is efficient and effective. This resolution is not only something being put forward, or at least the Councilmember Chu is asking the city put forward on behalf of San Jose. It's been supported and endorsed by San Francisco, Millbrae, Daly City, LA, Berkeley, Santa Clara, a number of cities, both far and wide, and certainly our neighboring city of Santa Clara, based upon the impact to our businesses and our residents by continuing to squeeze the services of the Postal Service. And one of the key components of the resolution is to reduce the amount of regulation on our Postal Service to allow them to compete with private sector mail delivery services so that they can enter the 21st century and sustain the services that they provide so well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. We don't have a staff report on this, so I have a couple of questions. One, I don't know where this might be in our approved legislative priorities list, if it's anything or if it's something completely outside that. And second, I haven't read the bill or bills, so I'm not sure what the status of the Postal Service is. It looked to me like they're already on a path to a failure because they're losing billions of dollars every year, and they're trying to do something about that, which is what brought on the proposal for Saturday service change. I also heard that you could possibly split the Saturday service and just do package deliveries on Saturdays and not general mail delivery. So I don't know if staff has any idea how to answer any of those, or.
Well, as to the viability of the Postal Service, no, I can't answer that one. Betsy Shotwell, Director of Intergovernmental Relations, but I can say that there are a number of measures out there on this topic, partisan, nonpartisan. The two here are obviously, the Councilmember articulated quite well, dealing with the Saturday delivery and things of that sort. The other legislation pending, it deals with 5-day or less delivery, no more door-to-door, and that's, again, another bill out there that is headed potentially to the House floor in the next few weeks in the House. But to the measure in the House, before you 6:30, I can say that all of our members are co-sponsors in the House of that legislation, 6:30.
From our local delegation?
Correct. The entire Bay Area and Monterey are in support of that measure.
What about on the Senate side?
The Senate side, there are 30 co-sponsors at this point, and I understand that Senator Boxer and Senator Feinstein, as of yesterday, hadn't signed on. I don't know the status in their offices with this.
Okay, I have some requests from the public to speak. Let's take that now. Guillermo Martinez.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We feel that there's no need to cut back on 6-day delivery, close rural post offices, or reduce the number of distribution centers in the name of postal reform. Everybody knows, or at least should know, that the greatest burden on the Postal Service is the pre-funding of the retiree health benefit funds. It costs the Postal Service over $5 billion a year. No other government agency, no other company are required by law to provide this pre-funding requirement. So yes, postal employees are dedicated, we are sincere, we are improving productivity, we are reducing costs to keep the Postal Service viable, and since 2007 have reduced employment by 100,000 people. And the Postal Service has, and for many decades, at least 2 decades, has not received funds from the no tax dollars. We are purely rate. We are rate. We are operating on rate, not on tax dollars. So please consider supporting Cass and Shu's recommendation here on this proposal. I appreciate your time and everybody listening in. Thank you, Mayor.
Ernie Arinaga.
Thank you. The current financial crisis that's
If you squeeze that handle, the whole thing will slide up a little bit, or you can just pick up the entire thing, like you did. Either way,
okay, squeeze, okay.
it'll slide up. There you go.
Okay.
It's a trick,
The
but you learn it.
resolution that's being put forward by Councilmember Shu would address the current financial crisis that is going on with the United States Postal Service. And right now, the Senate bill that is out there by Carper and Colburn does not address that. It requires the Postal Service to, and mandates the Postal Service to pre-fund the future retiree health benefits. And there are other bills there that we feel that would do better. And also, it would also cut the services to your services, which would eliminate door-to-door delivery to current businesses and eliminate delivery to tens of millions of residential addresses, all in favor of cluster boxes and curbside boxes. And by the elimination of Saturday delivery, it would also eliminate approximately 80,000 jobs, of which currently 25% are being held by United States veterans. So we're here asking for your support to pass Councilmember Chu's proposal, and hope we can have it. Thank you.
David Wall.
There's one issue that hasn't been raised concerning this ordinance. We as citizens of the United States enjoy one of the most important constitutionally protected freedoms, free speech. And by any stretch of the imagination, it's the affirmative duty of all citizens of the United States to always be vigilant as to the attack on our freedoms, because these attacks come in very subtle forms. One form is reducing number of hours or days the Postal Service has to deliver free speech. That has a chilling effect. Once you start down the path of closing down Postal Service, you restrict free speech. And at what point in time do you go from 6 days to 5 days to 4 days to 3 days to 1 day? We can't solve the incompetencies of not funding the Postal Service or running the Postal Service in a prudent manner. I think here in the city of San Jose, we have enough trouble at the council level of just balancing your budget and paying employees their required benefits and pay in accordance to your contracts. So I would support, go ahead and make sure that you do this ordinance and protect free speech. And remember to be very vigilant in the protection of that very valuable constitutional right. Thank you.
That concludes public testimony. Staff had a question that I don't think I heard the answer to, was where does this fit in our legislative priorities in terms of what we've just gone through with all of our committees in the council to set the legislative priorities?
Well, the priorities are really San Jose city service area specific, centered, you might say. So there isn't anything that's specific to this. I mean, clearly we would oppose legislation that would have adverse effects on our competitiveness or businesses, to the council members' points earlier as far as potential impacts there. And also these measures, if they were enacted, could expand the post office to be more competitive, and also then perhaps helping businesses with their goods, the shipping of their goods. Do
you know what these bills do on the issue of retiree health care?
Well, I can read the fact sheet. That's the best way I can do it, because it's pretty complicated. The fact sheet on S316 and HR 630 indicates that it would end the aggressive and unsustainable pre-funding mandate that requires the agency to make 75 years of retiree health care benefit payments over a 10-year period, a burden no other government agency or private company is forced to bear, as was just referenced. But I don't have the specifics as to what their proposal is with regards to what's currently on the books.
Okay, well, I'm interested in that because I think we have to pay for retiree health care. We're struggling to do that here, and just putting it off and ignoring it is a very bad policy, but I can't tell from that little summary what it is they're proposing to do about the health care. I see they're talking about changing from what they're doing. So that would be an important fact for me, because I think it's irresponsible to just say we're not going to fund our retiree health care and hope that someday we get lucky and retirees don't get sick. So I would need to know that information before I could vote one way or the other on it. The question is, if we refer this to staff, how long do you need to get us the fact sheet and the basic information?
I would want to work with the attorney's office as well, so 2 weeks. I mean, I don't think I can turn this around.
Yeah,
today or
2
tomorrow.
weeks is probably fair, because if it's 1 week, we'd have to have it up pretty quick by tomorrow.
Yeah, so you need to have it today if you're going to put it on next week's agenda. Well, what's the will of the committee? Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I appreciate the mayor's concerns, and I have those similar concerns. But at the same time, I wanted to thank Councilmember Chu and Councilmember Carr for being here to speak on this resolution. I think it's really critical that at some point we need to move forward and support this. Simply, my interest in supporting something like this is the fact that, although 80,000 jobs nationwide will be lost, I think some of that will impact our local postal workers. But at the same time, the negative impact that we're going to see among the small business owners is also something that we should be really considering, given the fact that we always talk about how we wanted to support small businesses and make sure that they thrive. And we're constantly trying to create jobs here in San Jose. And so any actions that actually will eliminate jobs, or at least local jobs here, is not something that I would like to support. But I do wanted to know also the questions that the mayor raised. So I think that we refer this to staff, give them an opportunity to work on it for a couple of weeks and bring it back. When we get all the answers, we can move forward with it. So with that, I make a recommendation to refer the memo to staff and bring it back to the Rules Committee in a couple of weeks.
Second. Okay, that's, the motion is to refer this to staff. We anticipate staff will come back and report, and then we'll put it on the council agenda when we've got that done. I guess the other question is the timing. This is the Congress, so they're not likely to pass this bill in the next couple of weeks, right?
I don't think so. I don't believe so.
Okay, so we got a couple of weeks that we can take to do the analysis. On that motion, then, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Not opposed. That's approved. Item G5 is the request from Councilmember Camus to extend the urgency ordinance to control invasive wild pig population.
Any questions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve. Shane Patrick Connolly's here from District 10 in case we have any questions. Anything you wanted to add from the memo, Shane?
No, I think the memo pretty much explained it all. Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your time. I can answer any questions, though, about that memo.
Okay.
We're trying to avoid a gap in
Right.
the coverage, and this is the recommendation that I received from our Animal Services and from Dave Sykes, Planning and Public Works, as to the direction we should go.
Okay. Staff, I know, I always get confused about urgency ordinances and regular ordinances and moratoriums, and there's all these timelines, but I don't have to remember them because we have lawyers to do that. So
Yeah,
is there any problem?
typically moratoriums are limited, and they're, normally when we do an urgency ordinance, it is a moratorium, and there are time limitations on what you can have, but this is one where it's just would be, the council can act, when it comes forward, you need 2/3 vote, and you need to make the findings of public interest, necessity, and safety.
In order to do the extension?
To do the extension's the same basis for continuing. You may remember the council passed an urgency ordinance. There was a sunset period. The idea was, well, let's wait for the rainy season and see what happens. Well, the rainy season's upon us, and there's no rain to speak of. And I think there's a need to make sure that it continues while staff sort of comes back with the other information. So my question would be, what council meeting? There may be a gap of a week or so, but what council meeting does the committee want it on?
Yeah, we were aiming for the 4th. That's when the existing authority expires.
So that's next Tuesday. Essentially, we dust off the other ordinance and bring it back in its form with a different date. The sunshine waiver would have to be, I mean, this is, agendizing it for next week, or we could come back at the 11th, but there would be that 1 week gap otherwise.
Ed, were you about to say something there?
Oh, no, only to perhaps note that from a staff perspective, it's my understanding really that there's been no substantive activity, whether it be trapping, shooting, what have you, and as such, as described, the extension would provide additional time to assess what's actually happening.
Okay, Mr. Wall, you want to speak on this?
I think this should be open-ended. Also have the city biologists start looking around and see what the acorn population is in nearby forest. But even more so, what's done with the pigs that are slaughtered? I mean, this is a perfect, wild pig barbecue is pretty good. I would think that this could be a food source for our homeless shelters or senior centers. For the most part, these pigs are healthy, they're just wild. And what happens to the pigs once you shoot them or trap them? Well, there's just not like 2 or 3 pigs. There's hundreds of them, if not thousands of them, that are out roaming around down in San Jose, primarily because of food and water shortages up in the hills. And so the only question I have is Brother Camus hogging all the barbecue rights down in District 10. And that's the impetus for his extensive extension of this emergency ordinance. Outside of that, I think you just should leave it open-ended and find a way to use this meat, because it's good eating, and take it from the big boy in the bibs. Those baby back ribs are really tasty.
That concludes public testimony. We have a motion to approve the extension. It wasn't clear on the motion what council meeting it would go on to, so on the 4th?
Yeah.
So we don't have the gap. Sure.
With the sunshine waiver.
We'll need a sunshine waiver. Is that included in the motion?
Yes.
It is. Okay, so we have a motion to put it on the 4th with the sunshine waiver to do that. And I gathered from staff's comments, we really don't have any data about anything that's happened under this. So we haven't had any problems in some of the problems that people were worried about haven't happened, and we also really don't know what happens with the pigs either because we haven't had rain.
We're still having sightings, although the activity declined in the Almaden Valley. In District 2, it actually picked up considerably. But
So
traps.
pigs read the newspaper, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
I think they are smart animals.
Okay. Motion is to approve and put it on the 4th agenda on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. That's approved.
Thank you.
Item G6, lending the police a hand, crowdsourcing video evidence memorandum from Councilmember Liccardo. Request to refer to the city manager and ultimately onto the council. Councilmember Liccardo is here. Want to speak to your memo, Sam?
Thank you, Mayor. Seeking referral to Public Safety Committee or whatever committee might be appropriate. I just want to clarify, I think there's been some concern raised out there about what this is and what this isn't. I just want to clarify this is not an attempt to bypass the permission that a property owner would need to give to a police officer when a request is made to seek videotape or data, but rather to enable the officer to know who to ask for that permission. And I think, so I think this is going to be quite safe from a civil liberties standpoint. Certainly the ACLU in Philadelphia, with this program started, supported the program, and I think we can do this certainly well within any constraints that the Constitution imposes.
Okay, well, one of the questions first came to me is who's going to maintain the database? Creating them is often easier than maintaining them, and how do we do that? And then what about the public records nature of it? And, there's just the usual kinds of issues that we have to deal with, and I don't know that we need to sort those out up front, because the request is to, get this on a committee agenda and work some of those issues. But certainly there's at least a scenario or two where this could be very helpful to our police department. I want to see if the staff had anything they wanted to add before we take a little bit of public testimony.
Thank you, Mayor. Angela Gaeta, Assistant to the City Manager, and I have with me Lieutenant Tony Mata, who I've been talking to. I've also spoken with the chief and the assistant chief on this issue, and all agree it is a good idea and something that would certainly help the police department. The issue really comes down to workload and what we can come back with, understanding that we want to come back with the best ideas that we can. One of the things that we talked about was potentially if this is something that would be within the police department software programs or something that we could maintain sort of as a standalone in the cloud, if you will, where residents log on and then PD can log on as well, and really just keep it very simple to a database. I did speak with a council member's staff person, and any help that we can get from your office as well in terms of getting information that would help us look at the issue. I think then we'll be prepared to talk about work plan and a time frame and what it is that we can do, what is doable.
I went to a press conference a couple of years ago, I think, with Logitech, in which they had some great cameras, and they were going to give away, 50 or 100 of them to neighborhood organizations that would allow the neighborhood organizations all to tap into the camera. Anybody, if they put it into the net, like a Nextdoor or something like that, the members could view through that camera. So I suspect there are lots of cameras out there that could be useful to us in getting them organized in a fashion where we can access them without having to go door to door in the middle of the night. We can call people up on the phone or reach them electronically to get permission. Could be very, very helpful. So I guess the question for staff is, if we refer this to staff to take it to the Public Safety Committee, when do you think you might be prepared just to begin to put it together at the committee level?
Well, assuming that we could work with a council member's staff person in terms of getting his contacts to reach out to me, I'm happy to take the information and report what has come to me, in 45 days if necessary, and then we can talk about steps from there and what, if any, concerns anyone has with regard to the information that I've received at that point.
We can certainly do that, and I suspect really this more than anything will be a workload for Vijay Sameta and not for the police department. I think this is really just a question of setting up a database and a website.
Okay, Vice Mayor Nguyen.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Liccardo, for bringing this forward, and congratulations, on the catching the arsonist. And
I could say I had something to do with that. But
well, I mean, I think you did a lot of great work by galvanizing the community and getting them to really walk the streets and help the fire department and in some essence the police department. But so I have several concerns, but I'm going to raise those concerns when staff come back with the work. But I was informed that the Los Gatos Montesarino Police Department also has a very similar program. As a matter of fact, I have a flyer here that says, "Do you have a surveillance camera?" So as staff is, going through this process and working with Councilmember Liccardo's staff, I think it would be good to reach out to the Los Gatos Montesarino Police Department and see how the program is working, what are the concerns that have been raised by the residents who live in those neighborhoods, in those communities. I think that would really help us to answer some of the concerns that I've been hearing out there regarding to whether or not this is the right approach, given the fact that, there's a certain degree people will, to a certain extent, feel violated because we wanted to, I mean, they're doing this on a voluntary basis, but at the same time, we're trying to focus on catching the thief or the people who want to burglarize their homes, but we might be looking at something else, and so that could be a liability issues on the part of the city if that's not something that we're looking at. And so there's just a lot of concerns out there, and I want us to come back with a thorough analysis to see if this is something that we're ready to take on.
Mr. Mayor, members of the committee, I would like to note, if you pardon the pun, the bandwidth limitations among staff. The point of contact, as Angelique suggested, would really be her. While appreciating Councilmember's reference to our CIO, VJ, he's also pretty tied up in implementation of existing systems for the city. So the approach we would see in the near term is identified her being the point of contact, and I suspect we will receive many suggestions and offers to help. Including we have very good contacts at Los Gatos Montesarino, so be happy to make that direct connection, but also just really be a point of contact. I'm not sure in the near term, certainly in the 45-day time frame, how much proactive research we're going to be able to do. Again, as Mayor pointed out, the additional work that Angelique's got on her plate with related to both medicinal marijuana, Title 16 revisions and the like that have been identified as quick priorities. So again, just really want to set that expectation that we'll take it on to the extent possible, but also want to not suggest that this will be a very significant research project.
Councilor Oliverio.
Well, City Manager, I want to say that I tried to help you relieve some of your work by modifying the February 10th meeting.
Thank you.
Successfully. So I was approached by the Chief of Los Gatos, I think 2 months ago on this topic, and I talked to the Assistant Chief, and I said, what do you think? And he said, well, it's something to look at, but it's also a bandwidth issue on having someone actually go do it and review it and all that type of thing. So being that we're this legislative body of 11 brilliant minds that have ideas, which are great, they come from a community, they come from ourselves, they come from everywhere, and then we have the police force. Does it suffice us to have some type of closed session or public session discussion of how the police department plans on being the best police department it can be with the money that it has and the staffing that it has? Because I could, and I'm sure everyone else could come up with some ideas, but I just want to make sure this may be a great idea. There may be others that are even better, easier to implement, or there might be other ideas that are silly, but I want to have this kind of a picture a funnel where we're kind of having all these ideas, but then the chief and the city manager, mayor are deciding, what is the most important? What are the things we need to move forward on? And I feel we need to have that discussion. So I guess it's an open question to city manager and mayor. Does that make sense? And is that a closed session discussion where we really need to talk internal strategy about law enforcement, and then it's a public meeting later?
It's not a closed session discussion. It really is an open session discussion, and it may be a budget discussion, but it's it's a policy level discussion.
I would say this, Rick, if we're talking about sensitive areas where the police department's saying this is going to be our strategy to combat crime, do you really want to have a, hey, everyone can listen to that at some point?
Well, it's not whether I really want it, it's what the law allows. And the law does allow you, as you know, we have gone in to talk about potential threats to public facilities, and that may be encompassed. And so to the extent that you have a conversation or a discussion in an open session, and to the extent we need to go into closed session, we can always call a timeout and go into closed session and have a further discussion. But it's not, as I hear you, the broad discussion is really more appropriate in an open session.
So if the chief wanted to tell us, hey, you know, these are X amount of resources, and I'm going to allocate them for these types of things, and this is our strategy, our go-to market strategy for law enforcement, but it's something you maybe don't want the criminal elements to know, that would seem, you're telling me that could not be a closed session discussion?
Well, if on its face, no. I mean, to the extent there are actual threats to, potential threats to public facilities, yes, and we could then potentially bring that in. But, you know, in the abstract, it's hard to say that that broad discussion can go into closed session. Conceptually, it is an open session, policy level discussion, and we can see if there are any portions of it that are more appropriate to be in a closed session.
Okay, so that's my area of concern. I want to tackle this as a big, you know, what are all the ideas out there? What are all the things that the chief and his team of leadership may want to implement, or might just say, it's a nice idea, but I can't, or not at this time, or this is great, you know, whatever. But I sort of want that to be something, so I'm sort of asking that of the committee in general outside of this memo today.
I think last year, maybe it was the year before, in the budget process, we had a couple of study sessions. One of those was on the police department, maybe another one on the fire department, because certainly the budget and how the money gets spent is our decision, and we do get into some of those kinds of details just by virtue of doing the budget. So maybe there's a spot in the budget process for talking about the larger. Everybody has a lot of ideas, and let the chief deal with, here's the best way to approach it.
Could I offer a suggestion, Mayor?
Sure.
I think certainly there's a concern about resources and concern about bandwidth. I get that. Perhaps with some additional information, City Manager's Office through Angelique, we'd be happy to provide any assistance we can, at least put together a sense about what is really required in terms of hours of time and dollars. And then perhaps that conversation could be had during the budget process about what we really want to allocate resources to. There are many innovations out there we could be working on. I suspect this will be among the cheapest, since really it's just about the creation of a website or a web page, really, and a database.
Well, let me suggest that we have staff spend some time sort of scoping this and then come back to us so we can get a feel for the workload before we put it on a Public Safety Committee agenda. And I'd suggest as part of that scoping that you consider the Silicon Valley Talent Partnership, because this is kind of a package deal that we could get people who don't currently work for the police department or the city manager to help us and increase that bandwidth on a project-by-project basis. This might be something where we could do that. And it would be more effective that way. But we'll give staff a chance to talk with Councilor Liccardo and his staff and get the work that they've done, kind of scope the size of it, and then come back to rules when we talk about the public safety agenda in a future meeting. And then I think then your question about, well, how do we have the broader discussion about all of the ideas people have? I think we should look to the budget process. Somewhere in that process, I think that's the thing, is we get ready to spend the money, let's figure out how we're going to spend it most effectively. And we expect the chief to have that figured out. We could have that discussion then, I think, somewhere in that sequence of study sessions.
Or at a council meeting and
Could be
or
earlier.
potential future study session date. If it seemed to be important enough to have the
But not
discussion.
February 19th.
Correct.
Because
and that would be too soon.
Yeah, that would be too soon. And we already gave that date up. I have a couple of people want to speak on this. Aurelia Sanchez.
Hello. With all due respect, Councilmember Liccardo, I'm going to say this is a very bad idea, and I'm going to tell you why. First of all, we have very few resources at this time. You know, what solved that arson crime was not the video cameras. It was a police sergeant who worked overtime. It was good police work. The second point I want to make is that I was, you know, I'm a member of Nextdoor.com, and we always get videos where people are being burglarized or something happening, but nothing is done because we just don't have the resources. The third point I want to make is that I was watching the news, and they mentioned that San Jose had close to 2,000 unsolved sexual assault cases because the DNA could not be processed. I don't know if this is a county problem or a city problem, but in my mind, it's everybody's problem. And I'm trying to be as honest but respectful. I think the city goes forward too many times on ideas without looking backwards on the mess we have. And I'm going to bring, and thank you, Councilmember Madison. I wrote you, I sent you an email regarding the jungle. If you guys want to solve crime, you want to see crime, you don't need a video. Just go down the street from where I live at the areas known as the jungle. We're having assaults at San Jose State, but nobody says or does anything. Why not put a few cameras there? You know, I as a taxpayer and as a resident of the city am very disappointed. And if I hear that phrase, moving at the speed of business, I'm going to scream. We are not a business. We are a city that needs to provide services. Thank you.
David Wall.
Every piece of evidence to any crime should be afforded to the San Jose Police Department without hesitation or delay. This means a person that has a security system in their house can download it onto a flash drive and immediately call the San Jose Police and surrender that evidence. That evidence becomes property of the San Jose Police, protected under the work product rule in the deliberative process, so it won't go to a public record search. Until at some point in time, to address the concerns of the previous speaker, this is a great idea by Councilmember Liccardo, and he's noteworthy for his common decency and protection of the people in his district, which was afforded many hours of your extra time, sir. Thank you very much. Now, with reference to lending the police a hand, as it is printed here today, it is one thing to lend the police a hand with one hand, and yet with another councillary hand, put that hand in the police officer's wallet and take away his pay or her pay and his or her benefits. The San Jose Police are the lowest paid police agency in the area, and that's part and parcel of why we can't retain dutiful and competent police officers, especially in the recruit section. And also, and more importantly so, is the language for disability retirements. Anybody that's a police officer in this town that gets hurt is going to be out of a job, as it is written today. So no competent police officer is going to stick around, especially the newer guys and gals that are coming out of the police academy. So whereas this is an outstanding idea by Councilmember Liccardo, excuse me, sir, this is just part of a systemic problem of which this council is responsible for almost the wholesale destruction of the San Jose Police Department through unilateral imposition of the aforementioned Measure B and other draconian measures to control costs that councils have afforded. Thank you.
That concludes public testimony. So we have really two things here. One is this is the specific request, and the other is a more general request. And we need to give staff a chance to figure out where we might fit the more general discussion into the budget process. And you know, there's no immediate date on that.
Certainly, unless we find a more expedient way to do it, we can incorporate this into the budget study sessions that will be happening early May, if not sooner.
Okay, and I forgot, do we have a motion to refer?
No motion yet.
No motion yet, okay. So we need a motion to refer these to staff and then bring one of them back sooner. That would be the memorandum from Councilor Liccardo with a scoping and workload assessment before we put it to a committee. Okay, on that motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed? That's what we'll do. Thank you, Councilor Liccardo. Next item is G7, a memorandum from Councilmember Campos to put a half-cent general sales tax increase to fund city services on the ballot. Yeah. Members of Councilmember Campos staff here to speak to that. I'll let you.
Good afternoon. I'm here on behalf of Councilmember Campos, who is at a medical appointment this afternoon. My name is Nicole Willett, and this is Garrett Radcliffe. And we're here to talk about the increase in sales tax. Given the current budget allocations and restraints, there's not enough money for the city to provide the necessary services to our citizens, and therefore Councilmember Campos has put forth this memo.
Okay. Staff, last time we dealt with the tax revenue measures, the council took some action. I've forgotten exactly what it is, other than we're going to do the library parcel tax, and we were going to continue to think about the sales tax.
Right, which is the impetus for the current poll that is being conducted right now and that will feed into the study session or the special session on February 10th.
So we'll be discussing revenue measures on the 10th. What I would recommend we do with this memo is to defer this action until after the 10th, put it on the Rules Committee agenda. I guess that would be the 12th, February 12th. So after we have the council discussion on the 10th, we'll have the polling survey back, and that'll be part of that discussion, because the action, if the council is going to put it on the June ballot, we have the first meeting in March, I think, is the last date to do something.
That's correct.
So that would be a sufficient time for Rules to get it on that agenda, if that's what the council wants to do. Okay, so we just defer this till February 12th.
Motion to defer to February 12th.
Second.
Have a motion to do so. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No, I'm sorry, I got one request to speak before I call the vote. Mr. Wall.
I appreciate Councilmember Campos's thrust in this memo. However, the memo has an inherent weakness in it to be successful with reference to using funding for the San Jose Police as a pry bar for success. If this memo is restructured to make the sales tax revenue a restricted use fund, in other words, the restrictions placed on monies raised from the sales tax would be almost impossible, if not impossible, for council to override it and delegate it to other city services. I could support such an endeavor. I support creating a fund for public safety for police and fire from the sales tax, specifically only directed to them, because in the future you're going to have to annuitize these two functions within city service because of the exploding costs of city government. And therefore, any monies derived from this under Councilmember Campos's memo could easily be siphoned off or redirected for a wild pig barbecue in District 10 or 5, okay, versus funding for what is stated here, using the police department as positive advertisement type trailers. So with that being said, we'll wait for further discussion, but we have to start thinking of annuitizing the police and fire department operations to get them off of the general fund in perpetuity. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion to defer to February 12th on that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unopposed? That's what we'll do. That's the last item of business, open forum. Jeff Bedolla.
Thank you. This is for mostly the city manager. There is a College Park Neighborhood Association meeting scheduled for this Thursday on traffic safety. I perceive traffic conditions have worsened as a result of the closure of Emery Street. There is a lingering question concerning the status of the pedestrian easement on Emery Street. This matter was not resolved on December 18th, 2012, when the council considered the approval of the purchase and sales agreement. As proposed by Councilman Oliverio, I think the motion was amended to remove the pedestrian easement. That means the city of San Jose still has this easement. So why is the pedestrian access still blocked? This question needs to be addressed before PD 12-047 is considered. Either a public asset has been transferred without compensation or even public input. to a private religious organization, or rightful pedestrian access is being illegally blocked by Bellman's fence. The fence that blocks access was installed in the temporary road closure phase, and the city of San Jose knew about this problem and has not acted yet to open up access. An error of this type is a red flag. Changes to Emory Street affect the very conditions the traffic safety meeting is to explore. And this projected meeting must acknowledge problems of its own making to be in good faith. Thank you.
David Wall.
Is a compilation of documents, starting out with the organization chart, the front part of the organization chart for Environmental Services Department, with special emphasis on the Assistant Director position. We have then a supporting document from the Department of Consumer Affairs California Architects Board, in which the Assistant Director of ESD's architectural license apparently has expired last year. We have a memorandum authored by the former city manager, DEBRA, FIGONE, dated 3/2012, about the appointment of the acting assistant director of environmental services, which is the same person, which on page 2 references the appropriate architectural licensure and experience. We then, 7 months prior to that, we have on August 11th a class specification title, sir. How does one equate a principal engineer, the highest engineering position in the city, with that of an architect? I find that very hard to believe, sir, unless, of course, there's ulterior means of trying to provide a sole ability for professional advancement. We have then a copy of result of a public record request of information about the number of who were the city employees that constructed this principal engineer / architect class specification. There's some questions about this document, but the document speaks for itself as it is presented today. Lastly, we have a position of the future, a document on council agenda for the 26th of February 2000. Oh, it's actually passed 2013, last year, in which this architect basically is overseeing a $2.2 billion capital improvement program at the Water Pollution Control Plant. How is that possible? How is it possible that an architect is equal to a principal engineer and has authority? Thank you.
Before we adjourn, I want to go back to the study session agenda. I was just looking at it, we take off the item 3.4. I think we need another line on there, which would be discussion of budget priorities. At some point, the council is going to get into that discussion. I'm not sure where it fits in there, but we ought to just put it on the agenda as a last item to discuss whatever priorities we have coming out of the previous discussions.
Mayor, does that assume action or just purely discussion and brainstorming? And
well, it's just discussion. No, okay. The action all happens in the budget process. So.
Right. So there'll be no memo that'll come from anyone about that? Outside of
well,
staff memos?
This currently is structured to be a special meeting.
To that point, Mr. Mayor, the reason it was structured as a special session was to be able to take action on the priorities. The fact that we've now taken that off the agenda could make it simply a study session.
Yeah, let's just make it a study session, because we don't want people thinking we're going to make the budget decisions here, nor do we want anybody to try to get us to make the budget decisions. We have a long process to get to before we make the budget decisions. So let's just add that. So can we get a motion to amend the previous motion?
Motion to amend. Second.
Motion is to amend to do those two things. On the motion, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. That's what we'll do. Okay. We're done.